midlife crisis.
No, this is my normal flow of things. I let my beard grow. I let it shave it off. I let it grow. I haven't gone baby face in a long time though. So, as my wife
I've never
refers to
seen you without a beard ever.
it. Yeah, well,
Never
this
seen you
might be
without
the
a beard.
last time.
Uh,
Yeah, it might be the last time I'm without a beard. So we'll see.
there's a
So,
famous Malcolm X quote. Let me see if I could find it. It had me thinking when I was binge watching YouTube videos.
about Nazis in Ukraine or what?
Well, it's related to it, yeah. Um, Let me see if I can find it real fast. I know I shared the quote probably several years ago. Let me see. Okay, apparently he has a whole bunch of quotes. Let me see. Let me see if I could do a keyword search. If I do a search on freedom or maybe hero, hero. Where's that at? Okay, let me do freedom. Shouldn't be this hard to find. Okay, that's in the URL. If I can't find it, I'll just summarize it from what I remember. So,
I did notice your comments on that though. Israel hasn't been quiet in Ukraine. They've been providing aid and they sent doctors. They're trying to mediate the thing. They definitely have not been because they're actually fairly good allies with Ukraine and Russia both. So
okay.
um,
So I can't find it yet, but he was basically saying that is this the same website? Or not, he's basically saying that society will have you believe that the heroes, what will have you believe that the ones that are really being the tyrants are are heroic, and the ones that are being um, oppressed are like villains. I can't find it. I do remember it, sharing it though a long time ago. And I was just binge watching white supremacy from like the last 8 years um, in Ukraine. And like I think there's a lot of things that they're keeping under the rug that's not in their interest to expose about that country because it's not going to be helpful to win over society or the world to 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 freely pay taxes to go towards the that cause of defending Ukraine as an interest. So like I remember when they were sharing like what Putin was saying about, oh, we're going to do a special operation to remove the Nazi regime and this that, and the other. I'm like, what do you mean Nazi? And like their president, I thought was Jewish or had Jewish parents or something. Like, why would he say that? Is he really off his rocker? I mean, I think he's hella intelligent. Like, why would he say that? And I just started binge watching from like 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 8 years ago, like um, Nazis and just racism in Ukraine. And before this whole like battle escalated, like I don't know if you want to say 3 weeks ago or a month ago, there's hella content, hella videos on Ukraine, and their militias that are like extremely right wing, whatever you want to call that, and how they participate with the government, like as if they're gangs. Like they in some of the cities, they would have like they would operate as gangs, and they would like quote unquote look for crime, and they would go into like cyber cafes and destroy it. Um, and I don't know, I just found it interesting how there's so much content and reference about the warning signs of white supremacy in collaboration, or at least being a huge problem with Ukraine. And then the light bulb started going off, where in order to be, my understanding is, in order to be a member of the European Union, you have to go above and beyond to articulate and demonstrate that there is very little, if not any, corruption within your ranks of your government. Right? That's one of the prerequisites.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and in regards to NATO, who would, for NATO and the European Union, what countries would voluntarily accept membership if besides the United States, if a nation's identity seems to always be coupled with white supremacy, right? Again, I say besides the United States. Um, so things just, is it a conspiracy? I I don't think so. I I think that the media, Western media, they're doing an amazing job keeping the skeletons in the closet for Ukraine. A phenomenal job. And like most people that drink the Kool-Aid and they're just religious seekers and they don't ask questions and they don't perform critical thinking or research, it's enough. But my views about Ukraine has totally changed. Totally changed. Do I think it's representative of the entire country? No. But do I think that there is a significant problem and issue, and it's merged into their government? Yes. Especially when I see all the accusations about how they're treating Indians and Africans there. So, all right, I'm done.
Yeah, yeah. Um, some thoughts on that is that um, if you had plans to just some thoughts. If you had some plans to invade a country, and you also have a known history of manipulating media, um, would it be prudent for you to amplify the existence of Nazis in a place um, in order to help justify action in the future? Um, that's one thing. I'd like to know what percentage or what size of or how much of the country falls into this group, um, which is probably not specified in those videos you're watching. Does it say anything but growing? Does it tell you they have 50% of the population falls into this
So,
category?
no, 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 no. It
Okay.
doesn't say that. But so short answer is it doesn't say that. Um, but there's been conflict in Ukraine that wasn't really highly publicized for a while. And I never really understood those conflicts in those separatist regions, right? Where some make the argument that the Ukrainian military has committed atrocities 8 years ago. I don't know. I haven't really dug into those details.
Yeah.
Um, but if what you're trying to express is, hey, we got white supremacist militias in Michigan and
Yeah.
Indiana, sprinkled throughout the United States. Does that really make the United States government neo-Nazi? And I would say no, it doesn't, right? And that's a fair example or illustration of like be careful like how you process information. But it's something that one is thought provoking, at least with the United States government, whether you call them puppets or not. At least in like 2022, like there's black, there's well, we now have had a black president at one time. There's black mayors. I'm sure there's. I don't know if there's ever been a black governor. I don't know, but like there's black police chiefs. There's
Hmm.
like there's black leadership, right?
Sure.
And so what's the percentage of African Americans to the rest of America? And I always thought it was like 14% maybe. And it's fair to ask the same question about in regards to Ukrainian citizens. What's the number of um, people of color, or specifically people of African origin or genetics in Ukraine? And I think that's a fair answer too. It was just thought provoking, and I found so much content after just looking at the very first video of white supremacy in Ukraine and militias and them integrating with the Ukrainian army, and I just went down a rabbit hole, and it's just something that's kind of hard to ignore. And so when people were painting, when the media was painting Putin as like cuckoo and delusional and absolutely baseless, like initially I'm like, yeah, something's not right with them. But then I started digging into it. And I understand that Putin probably doesn't care as much about white supremacy for
Yeah.
his reasons for invading. But again, as I started digging into it, and I started like, for me, call me delusional, connecting the dots of, okay, they hired a actor slash comedian whose professional job is to put on the show or go into character. He might be brilliant, he might be very smart, but his background is acting, right? And maybe that's
It was
necessary
Ronald
for,
Reagan's.
yeah, I was going to say the same thing. Maybe that's necessary for being the face of politics in regards to a nation. Um, it kind of made sense to me that okay, so maybe he is a puppet. Maybe they needed someone to represent someone that's not blonde hair, blue eyed, right? To try to like, I don't know, a wolf in sheep's clothing to try to say, oh no, this government does not side with white supremacy. Well, we have a Jewish president, right? It just makes me think about
Yeah, because
what was
clearly
yeah.
the white supremacists are going to are going to get somebody elected that they totally despise and hate just so that they don't get looked at about their white supremacy. They're not very good white supremacists if they do that. Um,
Well, I'm not sure if you're being well. It sounds like you're being sarcastic, but I would
I
say
am,
no. Yeah.
yeah.
Well,
So
I
the
would
thing
say
is,
that
I, I think, and I mentioned this at the start, is that there. Well, I didn't say that when Putin said there's Nazis in Ukraine, they're not Nazis. I wouldn't call them, but white supremacists or whatever. Yeah, there definitely isn't. I don't even know that you'd say they're white supremacists. Were they when they were attacking people in in the that region? Uh, were they attacking like? Was there a whole bunch of like black and Indian cafes or Jewish cafes in
no,
Donetsk or whatever it is, or like
no,
who are they going to fight in? Who are the white supremacists going to try to you know beat up in Eastern Europe where there's mostly white people? Um,
Well, it's the
but
same argument with the United States, right? It's
yeah,
they do not want, just like a lot of folks in the United States, they do not want the government to be influenced by people that do not have ethnic origins in their country.
yeah. So it wouldn't make sense for them to raise up a Jewish um, president, but if they
It would
didn't
make
want somebody to
sense.
have influence,
No,
because you would
it
literally put influence at the head of it. But I mean, but regardless,
okay.
what percentage of the population of that is that? Like, honestly, if you get a number out of any of those, if you tell me
Well,
it's
you
more
say
than
what?
50%, then okay, sure.
Well, the question that you're asking also needs to consider what percentage, not just what is the percentage of militia or white supremacists, but what is the percentage of sympathizers as well, right? That counts as well when it comes to coming into power and maintaining power. So,
Well,
like, okay,
but I mean, you could have quote unquote sympathizers that aren't at all interested in the whatever the movement that they have is, but you could have sympathizers in terms of they don't care, um, which is a totally different, or they're apathetic to it, like whatever, we don't care. That's in a different part of the country, um, which some people would say would be sympathizing because if you don't do anything about it. But still, I don't. Um, I think that if Putin had stuck to just those two regions that identify as
separatists.
mostly Russian or whatnot, separatists, and had stopped there, um, it would have made sense that that's what he was trying to do, is protect potentially Russian, and he would have gotten away with it easy, because he did Crimea and nobody batted an eye, and they took that quick. They've already taken those two regions, as far as I understand it. Um, that's different than going in and attacking Kiev and Kharkiv and the rest of the country. Completely different. Um, that's a if there's a sect within your government that is corrupt, or a sect within your government that's that's white supremacist or whatever, it's a sect. Um, it's a part of it, yes, and maybe it's not. Maybe they have too much power to take out because you're in a free society where people have the right to speak and stuff like that. Um, then what do you do about it? Big thing for me is what percentage and how much control do they have? If it's anything, if it's the majority, okay, then yeah, I guess Putin would have potentially some concern or some justification for what he's doing. It doesn't seem like that's the case, at
So
all.
what's the what percentage of white supremacists were not were was Germany in World War II?
What percentage? A
Yeah.
small percentage until they took over the government. But the thing is that they okay, you just leave Germany to its own devices. It's a domestic matter. Like, there might have been a humanitarian crisis, right, inside of it, inside of Germany. The only reason they became a threat, or bad in the eyes of the world, is because they started to go after neighbors and started to take over sovereign people, and that's what people tend to not like. um, Otherwise, I mean, you could say that any country where there's you might not like, let's say, North Korea's treatment of its people. There's a huge, actually, Russia could probably do a lot in North Korea to liberate the North Korean people from these problems. Why doesn't he go do that if he's so altruistic? Um, but nobody's doing it.
Well,
It's a
the answer
domestic
is North
matter.
Korea wasn't part of North Korea was not part of the Soviet Union.
Correct. Yeah. So
That's
there's where
why.
you get into yeah. There's where you get into the entire the entire like foundation. of what he's actually trying to do, and why nobody gives a hoot about this sect of white supremacists.
Well,
And it's just as likely to say that stuff was amplified well in advance to try to make it so that this whole thing uh, today is more favorable to Russia, right? I'm not saying that that's what happened. I'm just saying I'm playing the advocate here that it sort of makes sense that you would do that. There's white supremacist group in every country, I'm assuming, on Earth that has a significant white population, um, as there are probably black supremacists, if there's such a thing,
there's no
in
black supremacists. It's black equality.
well,
That's
in the United
different.
States, where it's predominantly white, is it the same in a predominantly black
Oh,
thing? I
you mean
mean,
like South Africa?
well, so South Africa, they took out the was it apartheid government or whatever. They took that out, and because Nelson Mandela was such a peaceful dude, it was there wasn't a desire to go and kill everybody that was there in the power structure, um, which is amazing. But I'm sure that there are groups there that more than heck wanted to see, and I'm sure there's in the United States too.
Well,
I mean,
yeah. So like,
there are definitely black people in the United States who want to not only see the white people taken out of power, but want to take the power themselves and shut it down. Like I
I,
guarantee there's
I'm
a small group of that.
well, I guarantee that out of 340 million people that make up the United States population, you could probably find 10 people
Yep.
that if they could, those 10 people would want to eliminate all white people. Yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
No,
Right?
I'm
It goes
sure it's
for
more than 10 people. But that's the thing is you could say that you could justify anything if you're looking at subsets of a population.
well, this is what I'm justifying. Aleppo didn't matter, right? Um, Vietnam didn't matter. Well, Vietnam didn't matter. Syria didn't matter. Iraq didn't matter, right?
Hmm.
Somalia didn't matter. Ethiopia today doesn't matter, right? It really is white supremacy. It really is. For the whole world to stall and for there to be active discussions every single day about nuclear war, because how dare there be conflict and invasion on a white country? This changes everything. I honestly believe that we're living through yet another example of white supremacy and something that shouldn't happen to white people. And this is why there's such a strong push, such a strong reaction to Ukraine. How else can you or anybody else explain the reaction of all the conflict that we have across the world, which usually is people of color, but with this white country, everything changes. All of a sudden, this you're flooded, you're inundated with news. Not the Kardashians anymore. Ukraine. When it's uh, Boko Haram or whatever you call that Nigerian group, they kidnap like 100 and something women, or maybe it was 50 women, right? From a school. Yeah, it made news maybe for like 2 or 3 days. Boko Haram. Um, you have other atrocities that happen in Sudan, right? It may get a couple minutes of coverage, maybe for a week, and then that's it. But as soon as there's shelling in Ukraine, from day one, all eyes has been on it. And so this is probably rhetorical, and maybe you're in agreement. I'm not sure. You're free to have your opinion or viewpoints. But if this is not white supremacy on a world platform, then what is? In regards to the amount of attention and amount of money that is invested from United States and all these other governments to this white country.
Yeah, I don't think of it as a white supremacy thing. I don't get that angle whatsoever.
What
Um,
separate? Okay, so
I get that there's a difference in
bias.
color. Syria did get a lot of coverage. Iraq got forever coverage. I mean, we were the aggressors in that situation.
Oh, so were they consistently, um, were
On
they
the side of Iraq,
consistently? No, no. Hear me out. Were they
yeah,
consistently entertaining discussion about trying the United States government for war crimes? Was that a consistent subject or topic in the media?
yeah,
It
yeah.
was
Are you
not.
kidding me?
It
Are you
was
kidding
not.
me?
It was not consistent.
Bush was continually talked about as being a war criminal. Are you? That's
It
exactly like
by what network?
a lot of
CNN.
them.
We're not talking
Do you
about
remember
Fox
Abu
News.
Ghraib? Do you remember
Yes,
that? That was all over the news for months and weeks and years, man.
but
It was
Abu
all
Ghraib.
over.
We could agree to disagree,
Yeah.
but the discussion about Abu Ghraib and war crimes, where you line up a whole bunch of American soldiers on a wall and you gun them down, that was never discussed, right? That the closest that we got, and it was still somewhat like, oh, yeah, that's too bad, was when they showed footage, and the dude is still rotting in jail. That transgender dude, that had on his DVD or whatever, Lady Gaga, that dude is still rotting in jail to this day, right? For disclosing that video of that attack helicopter attacking that group in which there were like two members of the media, uh, uh, whether it's Reuters or Associated Press. That was probably the closest thing in which not only did they gun down that group of people that were holding cameras that was mistaken for AKs, but then when a good Samaritan drove up in the van, you have to remember this image. I think everybody
I don't
remembers it.
remember any of
When,
it.
when that good Samaritan drove up in the van, right, a couple minutes after that gunship gunning down like that half dozen people and dragging some of the bodies into that van to take them to the hospital, that gunship or that attack helicopter, should I say, it engaged that van, just riddled it with bullets. They found two children in that van, in which the driver he was just trying to drag bodies into it and take them to the hospital. That was probably the closest thing to a discussion about war crimes, and that fizzled out real fast. So, like, we could have a difference of opinion, and there's probably things that you're aware of that I'm not, and maybe it'll take some time for me to get a better understanding of. I'm just saying that there's extreme bias for when it happens to a state of white people versus a state of Africans or brown people.
Yeah, I mean,
That
it could
can't be.
be. Yeah, but I mean, the thing is you could also claim that it's not white people that are driving it. It could be Western. The idea that Ukraine is a Western country and Western countries don't get this. Now, Western countries are predominantly white. Is that a coincidence or the causation? We don't. I don't know. Um, but it's there's probably huge sentiment across the globe for that, because it's Western media outlets, right? It's Is it white media outlets, or is it the fact that Western countries happen to be predominantly white and they own the most of the media?
Well, what's the definition of a Western country?
A Western country, when we say that, it's like Western ideology or European type stuff. So there's this divide. Africa, I mean, when they say Western, it's like oceanic and European, um, uh, nations, right? It's what
Okay.
compromises or comprises NATO. I assume that the term Western, um, comes from just power structures or
I get
imperialist
it.
power structures. 'Cause China is Eastern. Russia's never really been considered part of the West, even though they're predominantly Western in their geographic location. But it's the it's kind of it's the philosophical, ideological, and um, structural nature of those Western European countries that spread through imperialism to other places. So, um, but still, like I said, it's. I think that there's maybe more sentiment because they are they are by some people considered part of the Western civilization block. So yeah, I don't know. It's if it was,
Yeah.
let's say, Poland instead of Ukraine, and Poland just wasn't part of NATO, it would be a similar. You'd have the same thing. Um, it's like I said, it's Western stuff. I'm assuming Israel is considered part of the Western, you know, thing too, which is why when the sentiment tends to go towards them and not the Eastern, it's a geopolitical sphere. Even though if you are white nationalist, you know, the existence of Israel should piss you off, right? You want all people of any ethnic bearing that's not yours, which Israelis or Jewish people are, Middle Eastern. Um, yeah,
Okay. I view Jewish. Well, I mean, referring to Orthodox, I view them as white people that wear different garments or costumes. Like, that's what I see.
yeah. I mean, they're
To
not
me,
no.
Jewish people are white. They
So
are,
you're saying Jesus wasn't dark skinned? Because I always assumed he was dark skinned. Yeah,
so the
it's so much
Jews.
we put into the pigment of our skins.
It's yeah. So the Jews, they own like a third of Cleveland, where I'm from. They own like a third of Miami, where I live. I'm in a Jewish neighborhood, right? They're white to me.
Yeah,
They just wear different garments.
yeah. I mean, there's Latino people that appear, much more white than they are Latino, but they're still Latino.
Yeah.
Um, there's plenty of I think you know uh,
Hey, Gambler.
Middle Eastern people that look fairly white, or they
Yeah.
might look Spanish, um, or Sicilian. Like my one of my wife's friends, he's, I think, Armenian descent,
Hmm.
and he looks kind of like he's like, I don't know. He looks like he's not a white guy because he's just got this. He's huge and he's got this like really kind of dark pigmentation, but he's not black at all.
So John Sames, he he
Yeah.
said that he's Turkish, right? His
Okay.
ethnicity.
So there's Middle East. Dave Rail, actually, he's Latino, actually,
Is he?
partially. Yeah. I don't know if I don't think he's full. I think he's half or something like that. But um,
Oh,
we discussed he actually got like, because of his like percentage of ethnicity or whatever like that, he got grants and stuff for college.
oh wow. Okay.
Yeah. So he's not, you wouldn't like look at him and go, that's not a white guy, but
Yeah.
he's technically at his core he's not a white guy.
So
Hey, you know what?
like,
Oh, go ahead.
no, I'm listening.
Um, I was going to change the subject sort of because I was going to take issue with the fact that they always call white supremacists far right, because I don't think that that's accurate. I don't think they're far left either. If there's like another ground, because like right, it depends on how you view it, but like the right takes more. In some cases, the right takes more uh, identification with libertarians, at least especially in modern at this time in history, than they do with statism, which is what like authoritarians are. So I don't understand why it's considered. I don't understand how it got associated with far right in ideology. I just don't get that.
Well, I never really understood the definition of
Or maybe it's
the right
modern
and the left.
political
I
class.
just,
Yeah.
yeah, I always thought that the right was extremely conservative and left is you want to change the world. The right is you don't want the world to change. That's the way I kind of process things.
Hmm.
They want to preserve the old times is the right,
Yeah.
and the
Maybe as
left is.
maybe it's too multi-vectored to actually, because there's political left and right, and then there's maybe other stuff. Because yeah,
Right.
conservatism is definitely about. Um, okay, I could see that then. If it's about fear of somewhat fear of change, um, that could then fuel like if you're on that spectrum. Okay, that makes sense.
My late mentor, he was like, Scott, when you're young, you want to change the world. When you're old, you don't want the world to change. And it makes sense. So,
Yeah. Well, and but I think and I think we've discussed this before. There's evolutionary advantage to having a group, a segment of the population that is willing to progress or to change, and then there's um, a segment of the population that doesn't want that, and there's this dynamic pull against each other. It makes sure that you don't go too far in either direction, because
mm,
going no too much towards progress isn't always a good thing. I mean,
too
you
much progress isn't much a good thing.
well,
Well,
if you, yeah, it's framing there, but too much change isn't necessarily a good thing.
well, if your argument is or your reasoning is too much change isn't a good thing because for every new thing that occurs, you also have to manage the consequences that come along with it and protect against it.
Yeah,
Every new it's the same thing with every new invention, right? It could be abused, so it may be invented for a positive reason, but the side effects of that invention is it could be abused, and so we need to write new laws um, for it so that we can protect against it as best as we can. So so if that's the rationale, I think I would understand that. Um, but I just think that people have to die for change to come. Period. This is why we have war because we don't want to wait for people to grow old so that we can progress. We just have to kill them off.
yeah, I don't.
It's the same thing with Java. It's the same thing with C sharp. People have to die in order for us to use F sharp and closure.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is, well, let's just keep it in the tech frame because there is an adoption curve, right? There's like that's a thing out there. You can get adoption curve graphs for different languages and stuff, but even though you know functional languages are as old as time because they're more theoretical than they are mechanical. Um, the adoption of it is picking up steam for sure. There is the thing is I think there is still some constraint against there's resistance to it, and there's probably for a good reason because there's a lot of need still in the old in existing legacy code base not to completely go that route. Um, but over a generation or two, it, it it'll probably it'll take over. I'm assuming as the foundational stuff. I wonder if that's just natural progression though. So you have a like I said, the progressive type that you know new tech this technology is now good. Let's use it everywhere. And you got people going, no, I would keep using this. And slowly you kind of you start to pull this way as you get more comfortable with it and potentially you avoid doing some stuff with functional programming that shouldn't be done, I'm guessing. um, and then after a generation or two it just takes over as the predominant
So
programming language. So but it's yeah, so people have to die, but naturally it's not like you have to go kill them. That's that's a
slay them,
different
slay
discussion
them.
entirely.
Yo, there goes a C++ developer. Where's my sword? Where's my AK? Where's my
You're an
AR?
F sharp supremacist, man.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like even the code base that I am responsible for now, there is a very it's I mean the majority of it is in C sharp, but people know what code I wrote. The stuff I
Yeah,
wrote is on point. Like, and it's heavily influenced by functional programming, and it looks nice. I take a lot of pride in what I write. It's like it's just such a huge difference. I'm sure my OCD plays a huge role because you look at my files, you don't see any unused imports of namespaces.
Oh yeah,
Like you only see the essential. And I'm not saying my stuff is perfect, but I'm saying that my stuff is like in the 90th percentile of the
yeah.
world.
That's just good code. That's just good code hygiene though to get rid of unused imports
Yeah,
and
but it's
stuff like that.
almost, I swear to God, almost every shop I work at, that's the IDE will what's the word I'm looking for?
Yeah, red squiggly everything above the or gray out.
The opacity. It will lower the
Yeah.
opacity, right?
Yep.
And they still check it in. Like it just amazes me how like they don't see it and it doesn't bother them. And like with me, it's like I just want to be I just want to see the absolute essential for what needs to exist in order for this functionality to be observed. That's all I want to see.
Yeah.
And it's just weird because almost everybody else, they're completely okay with just obfuscated code with
Yeah.
sprinkled cross-cutting concerns in it, with unnecessary if statements in it. That's another thing that I have that I'm trying to manage is like we can reduce the number of if statements in our code if we just have if we have more precision with our type declarations. Type declarations. And it's I feel like I probably would have to put on a week's worth or 40 hours worth of like just examples, content, and dissertations. So
Yeah.
anyway,
It's hard to do with because you don't have exhaustive pattern matching. It's hard to do with C sharp to do that much type safety without checking for stuff like that. Um, unless you, I mean, you can use switch expressions, which are basically just sets of ifs, but there's not exhaustive pattern matching. You kind of have to at the source provide an exhaustive pattern or exhaustive match function, which is I've done that before. It's actually I can see the value, and I've seen the value before. If you use
how do you do that in C sharp at compile time?
you create a match function, you have to. It's something you
Compile
have to
time?
do. Yeah. Well, I mean, if you create a function that has a match function that has every single possible iteration in it, and you control what every iteration of that thing is, every part of sorry, if you control in that every single thing, and you require a case for every single case of that thing, as soon as you update the match function, assuming you use the match function everywhere, it'll tell you everywhere where you need to change it because the match method will now have a new argue or a new parameter.
When you say match, are you talking about this is something built into the language?
No, no,
Oh,
no.
okay.
I said this is something you have to do yourself. It's a way to build the functionality into the thing, but only if everybody understands what it's there for and uses it consistently. But I've seen the effect of having exhaustive pattern matching and realizing how powerful it is because of doing it that way in C sharp. Um,
Hmm.
it's a simple pattern. I mean, I can show it what I do.
Yeah, if you could send me a link.
I could just screen share quick. I'm sure I've got like a stupid little
My knee
console
went
app
out
or something.
like earlier this week, and I can't run for more than a month. Honestly, I can't run. So I just been doing like I I don't know what you call them. They're not squats because you don't have like a barbell over your shoulders, but I've just been doing that on the beach, and I'll probably go bicycling tomorrow and Sunday. I have no life when I get off work. I have no life. Like I get off work so late, like I'm just exhausted. I don't want to look at a computer anymore. And I pretty much just get ready for bed like 3 hours later, man. Like I don't think. this is sustainable. Something has to change. The way I perceive things, something. I don't want to live my next 2, 3 years like this.
Yeah, it's yeah, I get what you're saying. But that's been my life for the last 10 years. So
Yeah, but I
you
got
get used
like,
to it. You get used to not having a life.
if you're in like a small town, but like I live in like a happening
But man, you're
international
not killable now.
city.
You're not killable now. How can you kill that which has no life?
What does that mean?
It's a line from I don't know if you've ever seen the South Park episode where they do the World of Warcraft one. Um,
No.
there's like this guy who's playing the game who takes over the servers because he's achieved a level never thought possible before or something like that. And the developers are sitting around in a meeting room trying to figure out how to take care of him, and they're like, "We're dealing with somebody who has
Uh,
absolutely no life." And then one of them philosophically says, "How do you kill that which has no life?"
are they still writing South Park, or is that over
Yeah,
with?
yeah.
Yeah.
You should, yeah, the pandemic specials. You should watch them. They're pretty fun.
Um, it's
Um,
amazing how face masks aren't required anymore, except for buses.
yeah, and airplanes. I'm assuming any public transportation.
Which I don't understand why all of a sudden they're not necessary anymore. We don't have COVID anymore.
Nope.
Okay.
Did you see the? I don't know if you follow Babylon Bee, but
No.
it's kind of it's more of a right leaning type onion type thing. But dude, they got some hilarious content on there. It's always fun. But one of the things they did was I think they put up Putin wins Nobel Peace Prize for or Nobel Prize for ending COVID, just because the news has stopped paying attention to it, so it's not like on the front of everyone's minds anymore.
The Nobel Peace Prize has no. What's the word I'm looking for? It has no value to me. You want to know why?
Obama got it.
Yeah, not for what he's done, but
He
for what
will.
he could do. What? That's like giving it to Satan. Like, well, Satan, in theory, can always change course in his infinite life. So we're going to give him like the Mother Teresa award, just because we have faith that someday Satan has enough influence that he can change the world to be a better place. Like, yeah. So I don't care about the peace prize. No one knows who won the peace prize, Nobel Peace Prize after Obama. No one, because there's no value. It's no longer a achievement or an achievement. You ever try to find yourself correcting your grammar um, vocally? So like I said a achievement and then I said an
Yeah,
achievement.
yeah, I've done that. Yeah, actually, there was a contingency of people that were trying to get Trump to get the Nobel Peace Prize because of the de-escalation with North Korea.
Oh, Rocket Man.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was yeah. So, yeah, it's like he part of the reason why I liked Trump is because and a lot of this is what if you follow what Scott Adams says. Literally what Scott Adams says on his Twitter account. What he discusses is that a lot of what he recognizes in Trump is particular persuasion skills at play, and part of that is kind of like and part of that is the swing with North Korea and those names and stuff like that is and how he played that whole situation is huge persuasion techniques at play. So it looks like it's totally just a guy off his rocker, but it's not. Um, trying to come up with or trying to get this example put together
What
here.
behavior did he change with North Korea?
They didn't start doing rocket tests again until Biden came into play. Um, things were actually, if you look after that initial stuff after the peace summits, there was no news with North Korea for a long time after that. Um, and this is something that Trump did that Obama said he would do, and then the right always were like, at the time, and this is what, early 2000s Bush era, um, was that, oh, you can't just go talk to North Korea without preconditions and blah blah blah, and Trump did it. Um, he went and talked to him and had dialogue with the guy. He actually gave him the Elton John CD with Rocket Man on it.
Well, I know Rodman was the
Yeah,
ambassador.
and Rodman, praised Trump for that too. So it's I don't think Trump gets as much credit for things that he did. Um, I have not learned how to use switch expressions yet. I need to get that figured out.
I like using switch and then the value and then case and then the type name and then the value of that type. I use those now in C sharp.
I haven't written this in a while.
Are you still trying to do that match implementation?
Yeah, I was just gonna show you.
uh, Gamlor, do you write any FP at all, or are you constrained to writing Java or C sharp? I can't remember what he was writing. You remember what Gamler was writing? Was he doing Elixir? Was he doing C sharp?
Um, I think he said he was doing. No, I don't remember. Damn it.
Scala, JavaScript, Java, TypeScript at work. Oh, so all half a dozen. Okay. You know, I studied Clojure. It it didn't win me over. It was a paradigm shift, but it did not win me over from F sharp. I just like the compiler to like enforce certain things regarding the
TypeScript?
business policies. What's up?
You said TypeScript
No,
or
Clojure.
Clojure? Okay, sorry.
Like I really tried with Clojure. I really tried. It was a paradigm shift, but I felt like there was no enforcement. Okay. For most web like stuff. What does that mean? Like when you're writing like just a back end like processor, I mean, without any like UI, would it still be Clojure?
I've got screen share. I think I've shared this before though
Oh
with
shoot.
you.
Okay.
See, Scott, you're an animal. That's why I put it you on here.
Match, func,
this
dog,
is the
and wait. So the
this is the
parameter is
pattern.
dog, the result is T. The parameter is cat, the result is T. The parameter is Scott, the result is T. Okay.
Yes, it's a
And
map. It's a
then
map function with every case for what an animal is accounted for. Um,
yeah, but it's not compiler enforced.
but you can enforce that everything is actually added here, which is why it takes discipline, and it's still less than ideal. But what
Okay.
is enforced later then is if you're doing something like um, oh shoot, yes. You're doing something like let's see, and then you
You're one of
go.
those. You're one of those people that don't use var.
Oh no! I was just doing this to cast it. I guess I
You're
could
one
have
of those
done
people that don't say var a equals new dog as animal.
no. Well, No, I usually use var. Otherwise it's a dry thing. But if you, I was using that as a way to
Yeah.
cast it versus doing the add at the end. Um, but so here you'd go then. You know, um,
I mean, that's the same thing as a switch statement.
it is.
You can use the type, and then you can say switch. Um, I'm not sure what the advantage of this is.
Okay, so um, so here you're doing a. Uh, okay, so this would be. Seems what it's mad about, maybe. What the hell?
Name
Method
is a
have a
reserved
return.
word,
Oh
ain't it?
gosh. No, I forgot to put the return
Oh,
type. I haven't. Anyways, so this is the. You can imagine that this is often some module somewhere, and that this is a usage here, and that what this is up here is hidden. So this is a totally contrived example, but just focusing on this part here is you've got this in some place where you're doing a thing. Now, if you're doing this as a switch, as soon as we go up here and say Sean's an animal, um, you're doing this as a switch, that case will never get picked up as far as I know, because we don't have exhaustive pattern matching on this structure, right? So it would fail. But if part of the way that you construct your code is that you follow this pattern, then your next step here is to go add the condition up here such that every new um, version of your because you would have something like what, like type
okay, I see it.
animal
I see it now.
equals dog or cat or whatever. Um, Now your compiler throws an error because you haven't added that parameter to this method, or
Okay,
you haven't added this. So
I get
if
it.
you, yeah, so this provides you the capability, but of exhaustive matching, but you have to roll it yourself. And then there's no guarantee unless you make unless you can make this so that you can't inherit from this outside of this context too by doing this. Give it absolute safety in terms of everything is now constrained within this structure. Um, but then you've got to like be lame and have to do stuff like this, which is kind of annoying, or use static on this. Um, so there's some drawbacks to that. I wish what I really want to get from C sharp, and I don't even know if there's um, if I don't know what the effect of this would be, but I want to get a access modifier that has to deal with the namespace. Um, and I suppose you could recreate the namespace, but it's like I want it to be like internal namespace, if that makes sense, scoped. So you could something like, I don't know, internal namespace. Or,
What would
I don't.
that do?
It would say that this thing is accessible only within the namespace, and it's more interest. It'd be more better on like a constructor. This like you can only access the constructor on this if you're within the namespace, um, your current namespace inside of the current assembly. And what that would do is
You're
prevent.
you're familiar with the internals visible to, right?
Yeah, Yeah, and I'm not saying that. What I want to do is make it so that if I was to construct something like this within this module, that I couldn't inherit from this class outside of this, outside of this namespace in this module. So you have more control to say like, okay, you can't inherit from animal because the constructor is private to this namespace. But within the namespace, you could do that. I think in F sharp you have this effectively this capability. Like there's stuff that you can control or constrain to within the module that then can't be used outside the module.
So what
I
I
want to make it
practice
closed to
is
extension.
what I practice is uh, internals visible to, and that might be an attribute that's applicable to a namespace as well. And then, but within that declaration, you have to specify what are the external assemblies, what are the names of the external assemblies that can access
Yeah,
this code, and they're on a whitelist, but no one else can. So you have to be explicit about who the other assemblies are in the outside world, else it just won't compile for
yeah,
any other assembly that attempts to have this dependency.
yeah. I've used it. One of the places I've used it is actually like some of the game engine stuff that I've written. Um, if I have a common library where I want so if you have like imagine three things, you've got an application that you control within the same thing, and you've got a core library, and you want the application to be able to access the internals of the core library so that it can do additional interesting stuff, but you don't want to make that accessible to the consuming client library or like the consumer who's actually just using it to plot their game or to use in their game. I've done that. Also for tests, obviously, you can use it there, but um, outside of tests, that's a situation where it kind of makes sense as tooling, just to build tools around something. But yeah, like that's a little different than what I'm suggesting. Is I want to be able to constrain. I want to be able to constrain the ability of you to inherit from something. And I know that like probably like you can do it by doing this, like I said, and then making this a private constructor.
Okay.
Um, but then, like I said, now you've got this craziness where these things can inherit from it because they're inside of the this effective namespace of the animal. But now you have to like using static in order to not have to reference the outer namespace. I suppose this isn't really that off from just using the namespace. Um, um, but yeah, I wish that you could constrain the members of a members of a class only to other things within the same namespace, so that this pattern could be just done without putting these as children to this class, which would then make this a little bit easier to control. But yeah, I don't.
I think I'm the only person that omits the name private in my declarations. It drives me crazy whenever I see it.
Well, for a constructor,
Anyway,
well, yeah, I suppose you just do animal. Um, I think for me, if you have like, then you have it's just contrived, right? Um, what it does for me is that there's a bit of like symmetry here. whereas this feels like you're missing something. Now,
To
if it
me,
was
public
all straight up,
is fixed.
yeah, it
Go ahead, sir.
modifies this, but the idea is that there's a lack of symmetry here, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3 in terms of blocks, whereas this makes it 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 in terms of everything's aligning. So if you wanted to,
Oh, that's one way to look at it. I look at it as everything is internal and can't be touched by the outside world until you explicitly say that it's not.
yeah, I know that. So this is redundant, right? Putting private on this is redundant because this is the same thing. But it's not. I'm not putting it there because of redundancy. I'm putting it there because of symmetry, or I don't. I value symmetry over redundancy, if that makes sense. Um, because otherwise, like I said, it looks, it just feels wrong to have one with it and one without it.
Well, that's when I just tab the braces over so that they're aligned.
Well, yeah, but
Well,
then
actually, I
I suppose
tab.
it would be,
Yeah,
you'd have to do something like,
I
you'd have to
tab
do
the
something
last
like
name
this.
over.
This gives you
Yeah, so
symmetry.
I get what you're saying. No, no. So I would. Yeah, I get what you're saying, and that
Feels
was
like there
something.
needs to be something here. So that's the reason I do it. I guess it's possibly easier to read because you don't have to remember that it's always private by default. But
So I think it's applicable, at least in the style that I write code, like what you're running into when I'm doing UI development, and well, your UI, like your user interface, code behind, or even view models, or maybe even controllers, IDK about controllers. They may have some private members or something, but for like just business logic and not UI logic, I very rarely have private members. Everything is just treated as all my classes are either a set of operations or a set of properties, and very rarely do they have both.
yeah, yeah, that makes sense. So, well,
All
cool.
right, well,
I'm sure I'll show
it's
you this
been
again in like
real.
5 years.
I hope not. I want C# to die.
It's not going to. It's just going to evolve, man. It'll eventually be CF sharp.
Well, it's yeah. Things
You know what
which
can
doesn't
die
need high performance. What's that?
is regions in C sharp.
It should, and I still see it to this day.
Yeah, why don't
I
they
used
call
to
them
abuse
sharp
them when I
regions?
first learned C#.
I know everyone does. Shouldn't they be
I
called sharp
I hate
regions?
them.
Any preprocessor directive? Sharp, because it starts with a hash.
It, the code shouldn't compile if you have a pound region in it. Like, I mean, I used to abuse the mess out of it, and it's just weird when you observe quote unquote senior developers still using those constructs.
Yeah. It's just
It
it's
screams that something's not right with your file.
yeah, I guess I understand the idea behind it, but if your classes are so big that you need regions, you're probably doing it wrong, I'm guessing. So if you need to, and plus
I
like
wonder if Java has
IDEs give you the
something
ability
similar
to
to it.
collapse method implementations and stuff, so I just don't see the need.
Well, well, you have partial classes, right? And so you can like put that in a partial class of another file.
Yeah, there you go. Put it if it needs to be in the same base class, but it's cohesively more than one thing. Like, yeah, that makes sense. So I don't know.
I do that with my
Alrighty.
UI file. All right, it's been
All right.
real.
Yep. Have a good
Gambler.
one.
Yep. See ya. Bye.
See ya. Bye.
And I'm out.